Today we're going to talk about house meetings to build relational power. And just to jump right in, we're going to frame this quick presentation in a quote from the Industrial Areas Foundation National Director, that power takes place in relationships. Thinking about affecting change in this way, it is through broadening public relationships that individuals move from an isolated self into relationships within and beyond their neighborhoods to better understand and care for people as people. A house meeting of 8 to 12 people has 4 goals: leaders, issues, relationships, stories. We're finding these key things and asking key questions like, are you happy with your neighborhood? And moving toward, where would you start? We're listening together to find common ground, engage leaders in relationships, and listen to stories to amplify them toward real change. Thinking about this a little bit differently, these are circles that depict the policymaking process. Focusing on that middle circle in particular, the orange window of opportunity is where the tool of a house meeting may most likely fall in this process. The policy formation stage involves multiple chaotic dynamics and strategies, and thinking about a house meeting as the means by which the people set the public agenda, define and prioritize problems being addressed in policymaking. This public agenda is set by people, groups of people, and institutions, their interrelationships, and the nature of those interrelationships. So the tool of a house meeting is one of empowerment, listening for common ground issues, identifying leaders, and powerful stories. Putting on the lens of power as relationships, multiple self-interests form the foundation for strong public relationships. So conducting a house meeting, there's introduction, rounds, wrap up, and evaluation. So let me tell you how to do this. We're going to look at a specific house meeting scenario. There are 12 leaders gathered, and the group gathered here functions within the definition of community empowerment as a group-based participatory process. To this end, a house meeting such as this is part of a process to engage community members in building public relationships that play meaningful roles in co-creating public goods and services together. So to get started, begin with who you are, what group you're a part of, but really beginning with a brief story, sharing the linkage between why you care, the personal and the public, sets the tone for the meeting, inviting the group to move from abstract to the specific, setting clear measurable goals driven by stories of real people with real problems. You're gathered to listen, but to listen specifically in order to take deliberative action together. So jumping in, you dive into rounds and discussion. Go around and have everyone say their name and a specific thing that they would make their life or their family's life better, and ask, where would you start? So in this scenario, as folks start introducing themselves, one leader says, we've always been the last to get anything. Another shares, a lot of our neighbors work at the local poultry plants and transportation seems to be an issue. But as you listen, agitate. Agitation is a strategy used by the IAF when imaginations and curiosities are piqued and self-interest is made visible. Asking questions like why? Why is this important to you? And asking for individual experiences that move beyond abstract notions of justice towards specific, powerful stories that move the group deeper together. Agitation builds relationships as multiple self-interests are heard and connected then to that of other people. In this way, what should and how should it be done looks a little bit more like working together for the common good of all in some organized way. So back to the scenario, the leader that shared about inaccessibility continues and says a specific story. The leader from the county shares more about their neighbors and what they've observed in inconsistency in transportation by their employer or even by cab services. So in sharing, the group begins to make private troubles into public issues that are then brokered through this construction of public relationships. Remember, we're looking for leaders, building relationships, listening to powerful stories that will empower the larger work of action, taking action together. We're not issue specific yet. So rounds continue and emerging themes tend to pop up, but we're looking for important and unifying issues across differences. So in this scenario, we've heard a lot about transportation and accessibility. A house meeting such as this is helpful in expanding an individual's self-interest as common threads emerge. This more defines that we, the people of the public agenda across lines of difference. So move to wrap up. To wrap up, a key next step is to focus on organizing efforts on making contact with more people to continue to broaden the scope of the organization's relational power base. Remember, we're not issue specific when it comes to who we want to meet with. While in listening mode, it is important that listening is not limited too early. This is somewhat akin to confirmation bias. In order to best understand the needs of the oppressed in the community, broad-based listening must stick to the 4 goals laid out for the House meeting. So in wrapping up, following the initial wave of 1,000 conversations, let's say, focused efforts can begin to take shape in one-on-one meetings with those people in obvious power, as well as specific groups within the scope of the targeted issue. But we're not there yet. Broaden the base in this phase of listening. So to wrap up, evaluate. This is the last step of a House meeting. We're evaluating people and issues that stood out. Using the lens of a power analysis is helpful in evaluating how the meeting went, who should be followed up with, and what are the emerging themes that may shape the research action and that next step for the group gathered. Thinking of citizenship as centered on relationships, the organization can continue to build the power needed to redefine decision-making spaces, the public sphere, unhinging what they think of as the way it is toward the way that it should be. Evaluating the meeting through this lens, the group thinks about how it will empower its broad base to take action, calling forth leaders and amplifying stories as a means of making long-lasting change together, no matter the issue. That's all I've got, and feel free to check out the handout.